Hey guys, about a week ago I got an email from a fellow named Matthew Wells, and he's the graphics designer for Pacific Lock, and he said they'd come out with a new lock, a disc lock, and he wanted to know if I'd be interested in taking a crack at it. And I said, sure man, send me two or three of them to play with. And then that was the end of it. I never really expected that he would follow through, but in fact not only did he follow through, but I got a letter from them, and actually this is signed by the president, Gregory Wog. Says, Dear Bill, thank you in advance for spending some time reviewing these disc locks for us. From your videos, I know you've got a lot of experience with substandard disc locks from a variety of manufacturers. That's a heck of a reputation to have. Anyway, needless to say, we're hopeful that our Pro product will be worthy of receiving a more earned level of respect. Keep in mind that the price point intended is only a slight increase over the standard disc lock available on the market today. So it would be fair to compare our Pro lock's performance against the others. I'd love to hear your thoughts and observations at your convenience. If you'd like to record and YouTube your efforts, we have no concerns. So I guess that's what we're doing right here. You have proven you're very fair in your assessments. Warm regards, Gregory Walk. Anyway, nice fella, brand new locks, and I have taken them out of the plastic wrapping. Just a quick run over, they are 70 millimeter. They are labeled Pro, but they're not marked anywhere with Paclock. I guess their logo will be on the front. This is, I suppose, a first production run, but in looking at them I can tell it's got a very nice weld around it, almost undetectable. Very nice welding. And the other thing is it's a very smooth lock. Even the ABIS, when you turn the key, a lot of times it's real tight up in here on one side or the other, so you've got to overcome that pressure. But on this lock, or actually on any of these, they're all very, very smooth. There is some spring tension on the core, but all disc locks have that. So anyway, these are, I asked him to not give me special locks, and he said he'd take them right off the production line. So let's take a look at the keys. They are not sequential keys, which is kind of interesting. We have a, looks like a 63150, 63002, and 63023. So they kind of took them randomly off the production line. Give you an idea of the bitting. Let me get a good backing here so I don't fumble all over the place like I'm prone to do. Might be hard to hold all three of them up there, but nothing really crazy on the bitting. I would call these fair bittings. The bottom one might be a bit of a challenge, but the other two is kind of what you'd expect if you bought them in a store, I think. Alright, but we don't need no stinking keys. So let's exploit these things, shall we? I have not picked them, but I'm going to try to rake them open like we always do. At least rake up a false set. So I will take a Sparrow's worm, and the reason I'm using the worm and not the normal triple peak is because it's a pretty small keyway. Alright, it does have spring tension, so a little bit of tension on there, and let's rake them open. Okay, fellas, looks like raking is just not going to work on these. And the weird thing is I didn't even get any false sets on any of these as I was going through it. They must have security pins though. So let's try something just a little bit different. Now let's try SPPing. And to do that, I can't get my normal gem in there, so I'm going to have to use a Peterson, the H1 hook, the standard hook. So let's see if we can't SPP our way in. right, no luck on raking, and I got to tell you, this real strong spring tension on these cores makes it, I'm going to say, almost impossible to get any feedback off those pins. I felt like on number 2 I had a fault set, but on the other two, on number 1 and 3, I got nothing. I mean, I was basically just randomly moving around, feeling which pin was bound up and then giving him a shove. But when I shoved him up, I couldn't tell whether he was setting or not. Now, these are 6-pin locks. I would expect to get a little bit more resistance, but not quite this much. So I think next, let's try something a little non-traditional. I'm going to pull out the big gun. Let's try the electro pick. This thing can get through almost anything, particularly if there's no security pins. This ought to be able to get through it. So give me a couple minutes. I'm going to find a way to clamp these up so that we can get this in there. Alright, this clamped up kind of a weird way, but I wanted to keep that shackle free so that when we electro pick this lock open, it would actually turn, then we'd know it. So let's find the... I've also got it slightly angled, and that's because I wanted to be able to put tension without hitting up against the edge of the vise. So let's see if we can zip this thing open real quick. Let me move this camera, or I'm going to hit it with the electro pick. Alright, well, that's not working too good. Let's use something a little bit more non-traditional. Matthew was kind enough to send me 2 keys for each lock, which means I can use one of them to make a bump key. So let's do that and see if we can bump our way into these locks. Alright, we've got this thing clamped up still. It still works. The shackle is free. And we have a pretty good bump key here. And what I'll do is I'm going to take some little donuts, put them on there, so we can machine gun this thing. Perfect. Alright, let's bump this baby open. Aha! Got it. Not after, it took a little bit of extraordinary effort though. Alright fellas, with a bump key we got 1 open on lock number 2, and I probably hit that thing 5,000 times, so I would say that's pretty good resistance. With a level of resistance like that, you know, you always say, well, we don't need no stinking key, but I think with this one we might need the key, at least to make a bump key and hit it 5,000 times with. But I'm not satisfied. I want to know why. So let's take it to the next level. I promised to return these 3 locks when we were through, and I will. But 1 or 2 of them might be in pieces, so let's take them apart. Come on, baby. Let's see what you got inside of you. Alright, before we disassemble the lock and see what's inside of it, I thought it'd be interesting to look at the mechanism itself. You can see that there's a cutout here on the shackle for a locking pawl. So when we turn the key, it moves that locking pawl. And it's even a little bit more complex than that, because on the back of this, there's actually another cutout on the shackle where a little arm fits. So once you've turned the key a little bit, it retracts the locking pawl, and then that little arm is actually what forces the shackle around the circle. So it's a pretty cool mechanism. Anyway, let's look inside of this lock and find out why they're so difficult to get into. Alright fellas, I don't think it's any surprise that this thing is full of security pins. It has some very nice serrated, very sharp angles, and they're all identical. You get 5 of those, and then you have 1 spool. Let me see if I can get a close-up of these, if the camera will cooperate. Just super sharp little spool there, and this very nice serration, double serration. That is why we couldn't pick it with all the tension, I think. That is also why we couldn't rake it or zip it or use the electropick gun on it. These things were resisting. So I think Paclock took advantage of the spring tension that's on these locks, because when you put the spring tension on there, it's really hard, if I can get it to cooperate, it's really hard to overcome the spring tension and just maintain that balance so that you can try to pick serrated pins. It's almost impossible to feel them. I had no indication they were in there until I busted this lock open and took a look. I did get one fault set, as I mentioned. I think it was on lock number 2. That's probably because I got lucky and set the spool pin, but probably all those serrateds were still in place, blocking me from getting in. Anyway, fellas, we always say we don't need no stinking key, but I think for this one we probably do. This is a tough lock. I'm glad to see Paclock approaching the lock-picking community to try to improve their product, and they've come a long way. This is a great lock, greatly improved over some of the earlier Paclocks that we looked at. This is the leading edge of disc locks, I think. Right here, 6 pins, all security pins at a competitive price. What else could you ask for, fellas? A key. That's what you need, is a key. Anyway, thanks for your time. Paclock, thank you for sending me these locks for a chance to look at them. I'm going to do one more experiment. I believe that I can take a saw and cut right through here. Not a normal picking, but I'm just curious how long it will take for someone to saw through there, fold this up out of the way, and get into the lock. But that obviously is a physical attack, so we can't count that as a lock-picking attempt. But I'm just curious. Then I'll box up all these parts, all these pins, and send them back to you. Alright fellas, here's what we're going to try to do. If you mark the shackle with a black marker, and then we open it, and then we measure from the tip to the black mark, we know how much it extends into the body, and I mark that with a black mark. So when this thing is locked, the shackle only extends to that black mark. So if we cut at the black mark, it's not going to help us. But if we cut, say, where that red line is, theoretically, this whole piece will then be able to slide up over the shackle, and then if we had a chain, it would be able to slide out through that gap. And we'd be able to steal a motorcycle, or bicycle, or moped, or whatever. Anyway, let's put it in the vise, and let's just see if this works. Alright, doing this experiment in a perfect world. We have this thing really clamped up in a benchtop vise. I'm using a brand new metal cutting saw and my hacksaw. So let's start the timing. I'm going to cut right along this red line. Let's see how long it takes. Like we curved off just a little bit. It's still held by a little bit of metal there, so what I'm going to do now is get a screwdriver and just see if we can't bend that up out of the way. Not going to break off, is it? Nope, it's not going to break off. We have to cut it with the saw. So if I'd angled just a little bit less, We'd have been good to go. There we go. So, if I'd angled just a little bit more, I wouldn't have had to go through that extra cutting, but anyway, we still have trouble getting the chain over this one piece. So unless we could actually get it off of there, like that, now we can take our chain and pull it out of there. Anyway, it's an extraordinary level of effort for a friggin' bicycle, I can tell you that. And I certainly wouldn't be locking up a bicycle with this chain, but for your shed or for something like that that you would expect to find a lock of this quality and cost, this is well worth the money, guys. Anyway, let me box up all these parts and send them back to Paclock. Thanks again, guys. Stay legal. You know, there is one question that remains unanswered, and that is the shackle itself. It says hardened. A lot of times on these they aren't hardened. You guys know that. So let's find out how resistant this thing is to a 42-inch bolt cutter. I'm just curious. I don't want to ruin the third lock just to cut the shackle when we can do it on this one. So Jesus Christ. Alright, if you carry around a 42-inch bolt cutter, you can get through it. But in terms of a hacksaw, I tried to cut it with a normal hacksaw, forget about it. This thing is really hard.